Good evening, Memphis. Hope that you are doing well on this Wednesday evening. I'm glad that you could join us for the Memphis City Council Renaming Commission Town Hall Part 2. Thank you so much for going along this journey with us and the commission as we go through and we inquire upon what names of parks, places, and streets, what do they really mean to us and our experience as Memphians going through our lives and for generations to come. So I am honored to welcome you on today's second town hall and public commentary and input for the Memphis City Council Renaming Commission. Before we get to our introductions of those wonderfully and diligently working individuals who have been chosen to be on this commission, I would like to turn it over to Ms. Thelma Crivens as her responses to after the first town hall that we have had.
Excuse me. Did you want me to respond after Ms. Bradshaw? I thought Bryson had taken care of that issue, that instead of responding on 2 occasions, that I would respond after Ms. Bradshaw had made her comments.
Okay, well, we can definitely rework the schedule. That is no problem, Ms. Crivens.
Okay, thank you so much.
No problem at all. So, Ms. Crivens, you all for Memphians who are watching, just one of the diligent members who are really pushing forth the intentionality on how we transgress, on how to make sure that we get our right names and submissions and really included what the public wanted to see and wanted to hear through this commission. So I'm just honored to say these names of those individuals and Memphians who are on this renaming commission. As the chair, Ms. Kenya Bradshaw, vice chair, sorry for that interruption, you all. So as for chair, we have Ms. Kenya Bradshaw, vice chair, Sean Lynch. Also, other individuals in the commission, Pastor Ashton Alexander, Ms. Thelma Crivens, Louise Robinson Garcia, James Gilliland, Ben Jabbour, Dr. Andre Johnson, Ozzie Lewis Jr., Elder Roche Ragland II, Reverend Johnson Salisbury Jr., Randall Tatum of City of Memphis Division of Engineering, Josh Whitehead, Memphis and Shelby Office of Planning and Development, myself, Councilwoman Michalyn-Easter Thomas, and also our wonderful staff persons, Ms. Devin Thompson and Mr. Bryson Whitney, who and our wonderful council staff, Mr. Bryson Whitney and Ms. Devin Thompson, who have been assisting and helping this commission. So before we go any further, I would like to turn it over to our commission naming chair, Ms. Kenya Bradshaw.
Thank you so much, Councilwoman Easter Thomas. We appreciate all of the work that the council has done to be able to help support our committee and move the process forward as we examine renaming some of the streets in our community. My job tonight is to give you an overview around the process of our commission and then also start you all on the journey to be able to understand how we undertook this process. And then we will have other members of our committee, including Ms. Crivens, who you all saw briefly, who will share with you an overview of our methodology for this afternoon. And then we'll open up the floor for Q&A. If you would like to engage and ask questions, you are more than welcome to feel free to do that, whether it be on our YouTube page or on the Facebook page, or send by email. All of the information that we are going to share with you this evening, it can be found on the City of Memphis website or also on Councilwoman Easter Thomas's page so that you can be able to engage and activate with us as a broader community. To start out, Public spaces such as streets and parks allow for us as a government to be able to honor and memorialize people in our community whose the people or places or events that contribute to the political, social, and economic growth of our city, state, and our country. They also provide us an opportunity for our jurisdiction to communicate to our citizens the topics or issues that we deem important or that are unifying for us as a community. Historically, in Memphis, though, prominent public spaces, especially monuments, have been closely aligned with narratives of slavery, the Confederacy, Jim Crow era white supremacy, or symbols that reinforce the importance of racial segregation in Southern post-Civil War society. Our community has been undertaking this process of renaming these areas for a long time. It actually began in 2013. The City of Memphis City Council began removing symbolic representations of racial divisions in our city, and this reckoning took place with streets, parks, and statues that symbolized divisiveness, and it isn't occurring just in Memphis. This is a process that states all around the country are taking part in and re-examining who do they want to be and who should be represented in its public spaces. Our city council seeks to embrace public spaces, streets, parks, and places that unify rather than divide the city of Memphis. They seek to ensure that requests to rename streets, parks, and places acknowledge and embrace a common unified destiny, one that honors the contributions of all of her citizens, one that responds to dynamic changes and acknowledges the importance of our varied interests as a community. On July 21st, 2020, the council approved the resolution of the Memphis City Council establishing an advisory committee regarding City of Memphis streets, parks, and names. I'm now going to turn it back over to Councilwoman Easter Thomas so she can tell you a little bit more about the ordinance and the process the council has asked us to undertake.
Thank you, Chair Bradshaw. It's always just lovely to hear you all talking about just the work, and you can hear the vigor that's really coming through your voice. This ordinance was passed last year in the wake of lots of unrest in our nation, and just a chance for us to sit, review, and reflect on what we have chosen in our history to honor and commemorate. And so with that ordinance set forth the opportunity for every council member to recommend one community figure who would do and serve them well on this commission in order to come together and review public input, but also nominate some name place changes on their own, to come together and submit these lists of recommendations to the Memphis City Council, in which the Memphis City Council would then have purview to change any streets, parks, or place names as they see fit, brought forth by the recommendations of this renaming commission. And so the purpose was to make sure that it was inclusive, but that also the commission would have time to do its due diligence and work as well as research, so that we could ensure that the city of Memphis, that changes were being made in accordance to what we want to see happen in the future in our city. So this ordinance did pass with almost an overwhelming approval vote by the Memphis City Council, and supported by many of my colleagues and also Memphians as well. So the work that they've done over this past year has just been remarkable. The steadfastness and the tenacity that they've shown is really a reflection of all of our Memphis citizens, and the hope and the positivity that we want to push forward and have supported in all of our communities. So I'm glad that this was passed, and I'm glad that they had the chance to do this work. And I'm also glad that they have a chance to share this with you on today and bring it forth to council at the end of the October month.
Thank you, Councilwoman. The ordinance that Councilwoman just shared with us called for the advisory body of the Renaming Commission to make 3 recommendations to the council. One was a set of guiding principles that would govern the renaming recommendations from the public. 2, a process that citizens could use to recommend the renaming of a street, park, or place. And 3, a list of streets, parks, or places that the committee recommended should be our first tier of renaming. In addition, the ordinance requires public involvement in all aspects of the renaming process, including a public education portion, which is what we are doing today, and that makes sure that our community is actively engaged in this process. All of the members of the committee have volunteered their time and have met since the spring to review names, conduct research, and engage our community throughout this process. One of our first tasks as a committee was to determine a set of principles that could guide the City Council's current and future renaming decisions. After that development of the principles, our committee would then develop a public process that could be used in renaming recommendations. The following principles were adopted after robust discussion around what did we want to represent as a community and what should be our guiding principles and values for that. Our first one is that streets, parks, and place names should promote values shared by the Memphis community, such as respect, unity, and diversity. All of these values and all of the information that we're sharing tonight can be found again on the City of Memphis website or on Councilwoman Michalyn-Easter Thomas's website as well. The second one, naming preferences initiated by neighborhood groups should promote and preserve important neighborhood values, such as collective responsibility, friendship, and sharing. Third, streets, parks, and places named for individuals or events should reflect the contributions or achievements by Memphians from all sectors of society, including activities or events related to public service, business development, religion and philanthropy, social justice, social support, music, arts, city life, neighborhood identity, or state and national identity. The final selection of streets, park, or place names shall be based upon the best interests of the city, including but not limited to interests related to the naming principles, planning and engineering concerns, and most importantly, public comments. These are the principles that guided our process. Next, we're going to go to committee member Ms. Crivens, who is going to share a little bit about our methodology and also give some feedback around the input that we've heard thus far and how we are incorporating that information. Ms. Crivens?
Thank you, Ms. Bradshaw. Ms. Bradshaw will be reading to you out the Commission's list of recommendations. And this list will include proposed replacement names because existing names do not represent Memphis values or principles. And it will also include proposed replacement names because a commission member or a city council member believes an individual was deserving of recognition in the city's public space. In the latter case, the existing name does not carry any negative connotation. Volunteer members of the Renaming Commission worked with the research committee to conduct historical research on existing street, park, or place names to determine whether any of these names should be considered for replacement. These names fell into 2 categories. 1, streets, parks, and places named for Confederate officers, leaders, and sympathizers. And 2, streets, parks, and places named for public figures or other individuals who actively and or publicly promote racist ideology. Since there are over 9,000 roadways and over 160 parks and places in Memphis, the commission decided to limit its historical research to major streets and parks. These are the streets and parks that are most recognizable by the public. In technical terms, major streets roadways are classified by the city's Department of Engineering as arterial roadways. They include streets such as Union Avenue, Poplar Avenue, Winchester Avenue, and Jackson Avenue. The major parks are technically described as regional parks based on the classification system of the city's Division of Parks and Neighborhoods. These parks serve the entire city and surrounding areas as opposed to serving a specific neighborhood or community. They include Overton Park, Audubon Park, Martin Luther King Park, and Shelby Farms Park. Given the importance of the Memphis riverfront to the tourism industry and to citywide celebrations in Memphis, parks along the riverfront were included in this research as well. And they include such parks as Mud Island Park, Greenbelt, Ashburn Coppock Park, Butler Park, Chickasaw Heritage Park, Crump Park, Martyrs Park, Tom Lee Park, and Vance Park. Based on available and accessible research on the names associated with major streets, regional parks, and riverfront parks, volunteers wrote a brief biography of individuals or places after whom these streets or parks were named. Those histories included the accomplishments for which they were honored, their history of racial discrimination, and any other information that was relevant to understanding their public lives. A list of 15 streets and 5 parks was reviewed for possible replacement. They were, and I'll just mention the names of the persons. Some of them are associated with streets, and some are associated with parks, and some are associated with both. The names of the initial list were E.H. Crump, John Overton, James Winchester, Andrew Jackson, John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, George Washington, James Monroe, William Butler, John James Audubon, and Lucius Lamar. After a review of these historical biographies, the commission made recommendations to replace the following 7 names. That is, of 15 that we looked at, we made recommendations to replace 7 names that are attached to streets and parks. Those names are Andrew Jackson, which of course is Jackson Avenue, William E. Butler, that's a street and park, Lucius Lamar, that's Lamar Avenue, Stonewall Street after Stonewall Jackson, PGT Beauregard Street after General Beauregard, John James Audubon, that's Audubon Park, and the Battle of Manassas. Manassas Street is from a Battle of Manassas or Bull Run, a Confederate battle. There's a clear distinction between the replacement names and those not replaced. First, 5 of the 7 names recommended to be replaced are names of Confederate officials, officers, sympathizers, or battles. We did not want to support individuals who worked against the interests of the United States of America. The 2 remaining names of the 7 names, Andrew Jackson and John James Audubon, have specific unique issues. For example, in addition to being a slave owner, Andrew Jackson was an ardent supporter of relocating the southern tribes of Native Americans to land west of the Mississippi River, and as president signed into law the Indian Removal Act of 1830. This forced movement westward by Native Americans was characterized by death, disease, and famine, and it is now referred to as the Trail of Tears. The route through Memphis, called the Beale Route, is one of the federally recognized routes of the Trail of Tears. Ironically, this route is now called Jackson Avenue. That is, Andrew Jackson, a leading figure in the forced relocation of Native Americans, now has his name appended to one of the routes that became part of the Trail of Tears. We find this to be problematic. The other name, John James Audubon, after whom Audubon Park was named, was recommended for a replacement because He was not an advocate for values, principles, or rights grounded in achieving a common future or goal for all citizens of Memphis or the United States. Because all 15 names had histories of racist ideology, we reviewed the entire lives of the individuals to determine whether they made other contributions to humanity. That is, accepting that these individuals had major flaws as slave owners or segregationists, did they promote important values or principles that still contributed to a common humanity or a common future? The names we did not recommend for replacement met this requirement. For example, the first 5 presidents of the United States were slave owners. They also were the founding fathers of this country and thus responsible for the Declaration of Independence, the Bill of Rights, the United States Constitution, and other critical actions that led to the very establishment of this country. Similarly, John Overton and John Winchester were slave owners and were 2 of the founding fathers of Memphis. By establishing the city of Memphis, they created a place where we ultimately could raise families and enjoy the other benefits of citizenship. Finally, E.H. Crump was a segregationist. He also was a strong opponent of violence and the Ku Klux Klan, and worked to defeat all but one person on a slate of Ku Klux Klan candidates who were running for political office here in Memphis. John James Audubon did not fall within this category. He was a slave owner, believed in Black and Native inferiority, and was an opponent of the abolitionist movement. Although he was a world-renowned naturalist and painter, he did not articulate values, principles, or rights that contribute to a common future for the citizens of Memphis or the United States. An additional recommendation by Councilwoman Easter Thomas to rename Dixie Road was based on the association of the term Dixie with the post-Civil War South. I think that explains our methodology and the rationales for choosing the ones that we did. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Cribbins. As you heard from the information that Ms. Cribbins shared, our process was very thorough, and we went through extensive research to be able to identify our community names and the streets that held those 2 principles. Were they areas that streets that were named after individuals that do not reflect the societal values that we have now, or are there impediments to those streets that were submitted by emergency services personnel to be able to ensure that if you were to call 911, our police, fire department, or our safety individuals would know where to go? And so we wanted to remediate any of those issues as well. Now I'm going to go through a current list of names and the proposed name changes for us as a community that we're reviewing. One note: we also want this to be a community process. So if there are names that the community would like to have reviewed, the process allows for them to be able to submit additional names throughout the time that the city council goes about this, and for them to be able to explore this during future occasions. For our process, the names that we chose to move forward were as follows. The current name street of Jackson Avenue, acknowledging Andrew Jackson, our proposed name change is Cherokee Parkway in recognition of the Trail of Tears. Lamar Avenue of Lucius Lamar, the proposed name is Vanguard Avenue. The current name street of Manassas Street, between the section between Union Avenue and Madison Avenue, is the proposed name change to Black Lives Matter Street. Next, Audubon Park, proposed name change to Decosta Willis Park in honor of Miriam Decosta Willis. Current name street number 5, Butler Park and Butler Avenue, changed to Blackman Park and Blackman Avenue in honor of Miss Joyce Blackman. Current name of street, Stonewall Street. The initial recommendation for this street, as it is a residential street, will be made by the residents surrounding those communities. And we'll talk a little bit about how the council will plan to engage those residents going forward. The current name, Beauregard Avenue, additionally, is a street that is surrounded by a residential community. And we believe the initial recommendation for the name of this street should be made by the residents of that community. 8, Manassas Avenue, excluding the section between Union Avenue and Madison. After the first bull run of Manassas, this is also residential area of Manassas, and we believe the initial recommendation should be made by the surrounding residents. But all of these are names that we are suggesting that the council adopt a change to. Number 9, Dixie Road. Again, this is a residential community, so the initial recommendation for what the name should be informed by the residents of that community. Additionally, we are also taking on additional parks. Bellevue Tennis Center at Jesse Turner Park. Our proposed name change is Teresa Jones Tennis Center in honor of Judge Teresa Jones. The Geisman Community Center at Geisman Park. The proposed name change is Memphis International Community Center. Next, 4th Street from Crump Avenue to Beale Street. The proposed name change is Ida B. Wells Barnett Street. And lastly, we want to ensure that we are sharing accurate information with our community, even in places where we did not recommend name changes. We are asking for place markers to be able to present a comprehensive perspective around these members of our community. We recommend that there are place markers that shine truth on the statues of John Overton and E.H. Crump in Overton Park and in Crump Park. In addition to the information that I just shared with you around the names, you will find on the City of Memphis site additional research that has been done on each of the names, the process that we undertook to be able to rename them, and then also the forms that we use for evidence around each of the street names. We are next going to move on to our question and answer section. So we want to make sure that we get your feedback and questions that you all have of us as a committee. For this process, I'll be joined by additional members of our committee, including Mr. Louis Garcia, and then also Dr. Andre Johnson.
Good evening.
You are welcome to, good evening, Ms. Gloria Hyde from Facebook. You are welcome to post your questions on Facebook or on the YouTube channel, or send an email through, and we'll be able to we'll make sure that we get them. Ms. Crimmins, did I capture everything, or before we move to Q&A, or is there any additional information that you wanted to share?
No, I think you've captured it all. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Ms. Crimmins served as our parliamentarian and our lead on research. So I want to make sure that we share everything that we need to with the public, and also go into processes of how you can engage. Many of the streets that you all heard from us are residential streets where community members are going to have to be engaged in that process. Mr. Garcia can talk a little bit from our community engagement committee about how we want to go about engaging. And Mr. Garcia, while you're sharing that, could you also just give a little bit around one of the parks that we recommend naming is going to Memphis International Park? Could you talk a little bit about that and the way that you engaged our community to be able to explore that?
Yes, Chairwoman. Thank you. So yes, one of the ideas, let me start with the park first, which the current name is Geisman Community Center. So I want to be clear, we don't want to change the name of the park. We just want to change the name of the community center. And the proposed name for that is the Memphis International Community Center. Memphis has just grown now into such a diverse city. And we thought as a group that this would be a good idea to actually have a place where all these ethnicities and all these events that already take place pretty much once a year could just kind of unite in one single location. And that's where the idea of the Memphis International Community Center came about. In regards to community involvement, we've had the information on the website. We've tried to reach out to different circles of individuals that we think could have helped. We've given out the email for anybody that has any concerns or suggestions. Go ahead and just send out an email and share their ideas or their opinion. We need to go about with this whole COVID situation. We need to go about, I'm sure we'll meet again, in regards to how do we want to tackle these street names that are in residential areas. We'll just, I think it's proper for us to discuss that as a group in the next meeting, or we could do that right now.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia. We appreciate the input that you shared around the renaming of the center. And please note the correction. I initially said park, and it is not the park. It is actually the center. So I want to make sure that I restate that again. And also just re-emphasize the importance of celebrating our diverse community. As you all know, in the recent census calculation, when they looked at who is increasing the population of Memphis, our Latinx community is actually one of our fastest growing populations in our city. And then also our community is becoming much more diverse. And so how do we make sure that we make this a welcoming and warm environment to be able to let people know Memphis is a place that wants all of our people and wants to celebrate the diversity and create an inclusive community where they are celebrated, supported, and have place to be able to celebrate their cultures and inform our cultures and really strengthen the threads of our fabric of our city. One question that we've been asked many times around the city has a significant number of names. Why couldn't we tackle all of the streets in the city? Ms. Crivens articulated to you the process that we undertook to be able to make sure that we started with those major arteries of our community. So when you think about Memphis, some of those places are Union, Winchester, Poplar, Lamar. We wanted to make sure those places were the signature places that we started. We also are in the midst, as all of you all know, still in the midst of a pandemic, and the prevalence of the coronavirus made it even more difficult for us to be able to do face-to-face research and going out. But we did do an exhaustive process. And as Councilwoman Easter Thomas shared with you, many of the members who come to our committee are legal scholars, are researchers, are educators such as Dr. Johnson. They are members of the communities. We have a large population of faith-based leaders who were able to share the information out and also give us context around communities, their names, their origins, and the citizens who were a part. All of the members have also engaged out their networks in addition to the pieces that Mr. Garcia shared. So I want to make sure you all know that we have taken this seriously as citizens, and we want to work and make sure that this is a process that goes on and for you all to engage. Dr. Johnson, can you share a little bit about the education process that you helped us go through as a committee and also our general public?
Madam Chair, thank you for this and for inviting me to take a part in this. And it's just been a great experience being on this committee and seeing how we have come together. And before I get to that, I just want to kind of piggyback on the first question that you asked, the general question that we always get about all of the street names. What we are also trying to do is model how communities can do this as well. This is not precluding, this does not stop any community. So if you are part of a community and you notice some streets that may need to be, you can actually come together in your community and then present to us that we would like to present this street to be changed and this street to be changed, or how do you like that street over here being changed and stuff like that. So we want to encourage the community to get involved in this, because one of the reasons why I agreed to join this committee is because I do believe that naming is important. I believe language is important. It speaks to the city. And one of the things that when people ask me personally, why you're doing this and what's this going to change or whatever, what I try to say is that communities have always, from time immemorial, come together and name certain spaces and places that the community at that particular time deemed was appropriate. So at one time, for instance, the street that was articulated earlier, the community here in Memphis thought that those streets were okay, that those names were fine. Those names were reminiscent those names were good enough for the people back then. What we're saying today is that the community has changed. We just talked about our awesome diversity that we have here in the city of Memphis. And so now those names need to reflect the community which resides in Memphis today. So that's one of the main reasons why I joined on this committee, and I'm so glad to be a part of it. As far as the educational aspect of this, as you heard, we did not take any of this lightly. Folk on the committee did the research. We looked at the names. We read books. We went online. We asked other scholars and people who knew maybe a little bit more than we did about all of this. And what we think is that we came up with names that is not only representative of Memphis now, but also speaks to the current community aspect that we have right now here in the city of Memphis, and that we can all rally around and be proud of. And again, one more last time, I want to push the community aspect of this. The communities with those streets that are in communities, they can come. Those communities can come together and decide what those streets will be named. And I just look forward to the continued dialogue, the continued conversation, and being part of this diverse Memphis. Go Memphis.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. Miss Linda Saunders asked us a question around what is the email and how could they engage any further. So the email for anyone to share information, to be able to send comments or share support for the naming recommendation is as follows: ccrc@memphistn.gov. Once again, the email address for you to be able to send emails, comments, or questions on Facebook, or perfect. It said it anyway on the comments. So you are welcome to post comments on Facebook or being able to chime in on YouTube. We can still see those. And the email again is ccrc@memphistn.gov. We have a comment that came in asking around Audubon Park again, and sharing information around that this is a green space and wanting clarification around the why. So Ms. Crivens had shared that earlier, but I want to make sure that we're responsive and ask Ms. Crivens, could you please share again and elaborate around the why of changing of Audubon Park?
Okay, thank you very much. And I appreciate the comments that the listener provided, and it gives me a chance to make further clarification as to why. You mentioned that the park has had that name for 60 years. But what this commission is doing, and what the city council charged us with doing was looking at principles that guide our decisions about public space. This had been done in the past. For example, Confederate Park changed names, Forest Park changed names, and those parks' names had existed well past the 60 years. So consistent with focus more on the values that those names represent. For example, Forest Park and Confederate Park all represented the Confederacy. So the name John James Audubon is a name associated with slavery, with an attitude towards Native Americans. And so it doesn't represent current Memphis values. And so it's not just Audubon, it's all parks or streets that we had access to information to. We have to look at the changes because they don't represent current Memphis values. Interestingly, though, and I want to say this to this person in particular, is that you mentioned that it's a historic park, but the major historic parks in Memphis, and I have to say major because these are parks that have existed since 1900. The ones that are very important to the history of parks in Memphis still exist. Overton Park, the riverfront, not necessarily the specific parks in the riverfront, but the riverfront, Overton Park, the parkways, Douglas Park, Church Park, all those parks are very important to the history of parks in Memphis. They still exist. So we're not really changing a very, very critical history. It's just that Audubon Park hadn't changed names in a long time. But I invite anyone to go to the website of the Memphis Public Library and read the information on parks, and you'll see how many times they request to change park names constantly. Let's change the name of this park. It's just that Audubon Park had existed longer than the others, but parks change names all the time.
Thank you, Ms. Crivens. Well, I appreciate that overview. Another piece that we examined when we were looking at this was individuals' contributions to the city. And we wanted to prioritize individuals who actually had made a contribution to the city of Memphis. Secondly, Dr. Crivens has shared a little bit about the names of the parks and the people. One of the things that I feel like that we have done as a committee is also increase the importance and visibility of women in our community. Absolutely. And women with recognition of them in the names of parks and streets. When you examine that as our city, majority of our streets are named after white men. And so diversifying that gives us an opportunity to be able to elevate the role that women have played in our community as well. Ms. Crivens, I know you've done an overview of this. If you could share a little bit about the current name for Audubon Park, we are suggesting to change the name to Dr. Miriam Decosta Willis. From the research, could you share a couple of facts with us about Dr. Willis?
Sure. But first, let me reinforce what you just said, because in looking at parks in particular, there are 20 parks that have 100 acres or more, and 13 of them 12 of them are named for persons. All of those persons are males. So the most underrepresented group in the park system are women. So thank you for those comments. The person who we are recommending for Audubon Park, the replacement name, is Dr. Miriam Decosta Willis, a scholar and a humanitarian. She is the first faculty member at the University of Memphis, the first African-American faculty member at the University of Memphis. Dr. Willis graduated Phi Beta Kappa from Wellesley College. She applied for graduate school at what was then Memphis State University. She was denied admission to Memphis State because of her color, and later attained a doctorate in Romance languages from Johns Hopkins University. So it's so ironic that the person who was denied based on her race ended up being the first Black faculty member at the University of Memphis. But she was also a humanitarian. She didn't just look at her academic achievements. She cared about people. And so she and her family were actively involved in pressing rights for other African Americans. She may have been privileged, but she recognized that both African Americans and women were not allowed to participate in society on an equal basis as whites. And so she was very active in civil rights and women's rights as much as she was in her academic life. And she just is such an example of someone who achieved despite great odds and who didn't forget that other people deserve that right as well.
Thank you so much, Ms. Cribbins. As you have heard, we have worked hard to be able to make recommendations that aligned with the principles that we shared earlier and the values that we hope Memphis carries with her and then also lives into going forward. Dr. Johnson shared a little bit about how we want to ensure that this process lives on even beyond us, and how as community members, you all have the ability to also undertake a process. If you have streets in your own neighborhood, in your community or your community association that you want to be examined, you can do that as well. If taking an examination of the values that we share, we are making all of the resource and research that we've undertaken to be available to the broader public. So we have a process that we've done to be able to engage others, that we want to make sure that you all can undertake that as well. There's been a question around the Audubon Society, Audubon again, and saying that it was in recognition of the Audubon Society and not just the individual. Ms. Saunders, for Audubon, for Memphis, we also reviewed what was the naming process for each of those places. The Audubon Society isn't what that park was named after.
No,
it actually was named after the individual. While that may be how it has become adopted in modern day memory, it was not named for the Audubon Society. It was actually named for the individual. And then your second question around John Overton and E.H. Crump, we can go over again around in the how we examine those and what we're asking for. So for John Overton and E.H. Crump, both we want to first and foremost acknowledge that John Overton owned slaves and that E.H. Crump was a segregationist, and give you an overview of why we did not recommend the renaming of those parks. The commission members were first asked to read the history of those 15 names, as Ms. Cribbins shared with you. Neither were associated with the Confederacy. They were slaveholders and had participated. Some other people had participated in the destruction of Native American populations and cultures. After we reviewed these histories, we were then asked to identify those names that should be removed from a street, park, or place and replaced. What you see are the names that the commission voted to replace. Most of the names are persons, events, or affiliated with the Confederacy. Based upon our reading of their histories, commission members felt that the names that should not be replaced had also made significant or monumental achievements in other aspects of their lives that still upheld certain values or rights that promoted the growth and development of our city, most importantly, or our state or country. However, we do not believe that their racist actions should be excused or forgotten. For example, as Ms. Cribbins shared, the first presidents of the United States whose names are represented for downtown Memphis streets were all slave owners. They also established the foundations of this country, including the Declaration of Independence, the Bill of Rights. And in the case of John Overton, he was a slave owner, but he also was one of the founders of Memphis. So we are asking and recommending that placing a historical marker by his statue in Overton Park in order that we give a more accurate picture of his life. In other words, we accept that the names that we did not replace were imperfect human beings who owned slaves, but they also made valuable contributions to this city and country. in addition to, as I said, on John Overton, we are also asking the same be placed around Crump Park, and making sure that we put truth markers there that give you encompass the totality of who they were as human beings. Any additional, Ms. Crivens or Dr. Johnson or Mr. Garcia, any additional comments on that or any of the other questions that we've articulated?
I just want to say we invite questions and comments.
Yes, and we need to remember, we need to make sure that people remember those living on Dixie Road, that's a residential area, and Bellevue Tennis Center at Jesse Turner Park. There has been no proposed name, I believe, and well, yeah, I'm sorry, let me take that back. So Judge Teresa Jones for Bellevue Tennis Center, but Dixie Road. Right. People that live around that area need to go ahead and send an email and make sure they are in tune with what's happening, because it really affects them.
Thank you so much. So, but we have answered majority of the questions that have been posed. So if you have any additional questions, please feel free to submit them either on the Facebook or YouTube, or send them to the email. The email again is ccrc@memphistn.gov. Seeing that we've answered many of the questions and we've done this process once, I want to make sure that, okay, there was an additional comment. We do acknowledge Susan Shawn, who states that the city commission at the time decided on the name of Audubon, and the Audubon was named after the individual, as we stated, and Mayor Crump potentially wanted an alternative name, and the community participated in that process. We acknowledge that many of our parks and community names that we are suggesting change were designed by the individuals who were in leadership and in power at that time. But what we're wanting to do, as we've shared, I think Mr. Garcia's piece around Memphis International Park, is how are we reflective of the people who live in this community now, and how are we redistributing some of the power to go beyond just those who were in places of influence at that time, and make sure that we're recognizing the diversity of our community. Ms. Crivens gave you a statistic around all of our major parks in our community, many of them who have over 100 acres, 12 or 13 of them who have names, all of them are named after men. So how do we really reflect in a community that is predominantly women? How do we think about, well, how are they represented in our community as well? What we do know is this is not a one and done process. As a committee, we are recommending that we are not changing Geisman Park. You are correct. It is the center, the community center. This is not a one and done process. We believe that the process of naming streets, parks, places in our community should be a living process that is re-examined on a regular basis, so that the community and its citizens at that time can reflect on what do they want this community to look like, and how do they want it to be reflected. What we do hope is the values that we have set up as a committee can live through and help guide those processes as they go forward as well. So we hope that communities take this on and really recognize their place in helping to shape who we are as a community and where we want to go going forward. I am so appreciative in seeing active comments and questions and that people are really engaged in this. We really think that it is an awesome opportunity for our community to be able to participate and really guide how we want to go forward. And we appreciate you all engaging people around this process. I am really appreciative. We've got a comment around people informally polling. So we have done the same thing. So we have engaged multiple members across we have actually formally polled people and asked community members about their process. We have heard that people want us to examine and refresh, and we also want to do with diligence the charge that we were asked for as a committee. This does not, as Dr. Johnson said, preclude any community member from submitting additional names. One of the things that I'm about to do is go through the names again so that members could be able to hear them one more time and see if they have any additional questions before we close out and get additional comments, so that you can be able to now go back and have those conversations with your family, friends, and neighbors and your broader community. That's what we want you all to do. So we are extremely thankful for the engagement during this time. And then we'll also share more how you can engage more with the committee. And also, Mr. Garcia, from our community engagement standpoint, I'm gonna put a plug in there. If anyone wants to volunteer on community engagement and being able to engage, please send a note to the email again around ccrc@memphistn.gov. We aren't having any in-person meetings at this time because we are trying to be sensitive to the health and well-being of all of the citizens of our community. So we want to make sure that if you have a group of people and you want to get them together to be able to share this, that you have the opportunity to be able to engage. And then also we are taping these so you can share this out with anyone who wants to learn more about our process, and they'll be live on the City Council's website, on the City of Memphis website, and then also on Councilwoman Easter Thomas's individual page. Again, go ahead, Ms. Cribbins.
I'd like to respond to a part of a comment to say, if you're going to create plaques for Overton and Crump, they should also include the good things that both gentlemen did in their lives. Absolutely. Yeah, and that's the purpose of the plaque, to say that yes, they did good things and not good things, and so that would be included.
Thank you so much, Ms. Cribbins. We really, truly do appreciate that. And that's part of why we were wanting to recommend that there are markers, and that we have been internally calling truth markers, that represent the totality of the individual's lives and contributions to the city, but also represent the complexity of how that individual operated during that time, and also acknowledges things that we actually do not feel like fully represents who we want to be as a community. There was a question around if there are to be name changes. Could we use the names of fallen police officers and firemen who have died protecting us as a community? As you all know, one of the things around this process is we wanted to make sure that we are honoring individuals who have actively contributed and supported our community. And we think this could be a wonderful population for communities to be able to explore the names of our first responders who may have fallen in the line of duty, or firemen who have contributed to the health, well-being, and safety of our community who may have died in the process of protecting us all. Those are names that we would definitely recommend that you all submit. I'm going to go through the names of the streets. Yeah, if you are on Stonewall, I am certain that if there was a name for that individuals in that community, please share so that they can be considered as well. One thing about that I want to flag as well, we did reach out to our emergency services, our police department, and our fire department and emergency services department, for them to be able to submit names of streets so that they could recommend changes for efficiency as well. So for example, it's not going to be the best, but if you were on 3rd Street or 3rd Parkway, and those, neither the 3rd Parkway does not exist, but I'm giving you an example, like to make sure that that the police know where to go if a citizen was in need of help. We wanted to examine those. And so our police department and fire department also went through an examination of their historical outreach into communities to be able to see were there streets that they wanted to rename, and we included that information as well. To close out for to restate again, the names that we are considering for the recommendations for changing, I want to go through those one more time. The current street name of Jackson Avenue, we are recommending a proposed change to be Cherokee Parkway. The current name of Lamar Avenue, we are proposing the name change to Vanguard Avenue. The current name of Manassas Street, in the intersection between Union Avenue and Madison Avenue, the proposed name change is Black Lives Matter Street. The current name of Audubon Park, we are proposing the name be changed to Decosta Willis Park in honor of Dr. Miriam Decosta Willis. The current name of Butler Park and Butler Avenue be changed to Blackman Park and Blackman Avenue in honor of Miss Joyce Blackman. The current name of Stonewall Street, because this is a residential community, we are making the recommendation that the initial recommendation for name change come from surrounding residents in that community. That will also be true for Beauregard Avenue, Manassas Avenue, that extends the section between Union Avenue and Madison Avenue, because this is a residential street. And again, that also holds true with Dixie Road. If you are a resident on those streets, or if you know someone who lives on those streets, we would highly recommend that you engage them to be able to submit recommendations around what do they want their streets to look like and how do they engage their neighbors and broader community members. The next one is Bellevue Tennis Center at Jesse Turner Park. We are recommending that proposed name change to be Teresa Jones Tennis Center in honor of Judge Teresa Jones. The current Geisman Community Center, which is located at Geisman Park, we are recommending that the community center change to Memphis International Community Center. Next, we have 4th Street from Crump Avenue to Beale Street. The recommendation is to change to Ida B. Wells Barnett Street. And we also have the last recommendation encompasses many of what the conversation has been questioned about. Beside the statues of John Overton and E.H. Crump, we are recommending that there are markers that acknowledge the complexity of the lives of the individuals and their contributions to the community. And in Overton Park and at E.H. Crump in E.H. Crump Park. Any additional questions, comments? One of the things that I want you all to know, the recommendations that we have submitted are the recommendations of the committee. The city council has the final approval for all of those recommendations, and you all will get additional opportunities to be able to engage in those during those times as well. We are appreciative of many of the members be submitting additional comments and questions during this time. We are going to try to acknowledge them. I believe that we've done an exhaustive job during this time to be able to explain the rationale as to why we are changing Audubon Park in particular. But this makes me excited that there are so many members of our community and in that area who value that space. So I know that as it changes into any other name, that you will actively engage and make sure that our community celebrates that space as well. So I'm extremely grateful for that and your questions, comments, and participation during this time. Ms. Crivens?
There is a final question here. Would it be possible to consider, rather than changing the name of Audubon Park, use the new name for the new University of Memphis Tennis Center? That center is already named for someone who died in combat. I can't remember his name right now, but he was an honored person who died in combat in Vietnam.
And the second part of that is Audubon is used for many cities for parks, especially parks with many trees. You are right. We are firm believers of the Audubon Society and their contributions, but that is not the truth for how Audubon Park what it stands for or what the name was. We do believe that he was an amazing naturalist and was a person who gave great contributions to the society. But we also want to recognize, as we stated, a couple of the values were what were individuals' contribution to our city and who we want to be. And Audubon, while the park was named after him, there is no detailed record around their contribution to the city of Memphis. So I want to make sure that we say that as well. And we believe that even if the name changes, that the space is still going to be there. You will still be able to enjoy the wonderful space of the park. And also the trees. The trees will still be there for you all to be able to pick and have wonderful experiences under. So picking the changing the name of the space does not change how the space has to be utilized or enjoyed. And we hope that the name actually provides an opportunity for us to be able to engage and show an even more welcoming, inviting space for individuals to be able to come to.
Madam Chair, if I may add again, one of the things that was, availed to us when we were doing this research is really, again, the people that were named back then were folk that the community thought were worthy of being named. The community thought that those names were worthy. All we're trying to do in 2021 is do the same thing. Find folk who we believe now that are worthy and that contributed to Memphis and the growth of Memphis, to the city that we are experiencing today.
Thank you for that, Dr. Johnson. The only thing that I would add to that is this is not new, as Dr. Johnson has shared. Mm-hmm. This is a process that has been undertaken in our city many, many times. And we want to make sure that we continue to reinforce that this is a community process. So you all have the opportunity to be able to engage during this process in renaming the slate that we are proposing, but also as we go forward, we would hope that the values that we have presented and the principles live on and allow for a foundation for us as a community to regularly re-examine members of our community and names of streets to make sure that it is reflective of the diversity and values that we want to uphold as a community. So I want to make sure before we go out is I want to end with how we began and sharing some of the principles that we have as a community. And I want to just share those again. You all have heard the names of the streets and know which ones we're examining. We'll close out with how you all can submit additional questions and the next steps for that. So you all can submit any additional questions, comments, thoughts to ccrc@memphistn.gov. You also can send, if you have community engagement ideas, please share them with us there. You can access any of the information in our committee reports. We have minutes from all of our meetings that can be accessed on the City of Memphis website, as well as you can get these recordings from the City of Memphis or on Councilwoman Easter Thomas's website. The principles that we adopted during this process were that streets, parks, and places, place names should promote values shared by the Memphis community, such as respect, unity, and diversity. Naming preferences initiated by neighborhood groups should promote and preserve important neighborhood values, such as collective responsibility, friendship, and sharing. Streets, parks, and places named for individuals or events should reflect contributions or achievements by Memphians from all sectors of society, including but not limited to activities or events related to public service and business development, religion and philanthropy, social justice and social support, music, art, and city life, neighborhood identity, and state or national identity. The final selection of street, park, or place names shall be based upon the best interests of the city, including but not limited to interest to the renaming principles, planning and engineering concerns, and public comments. We thank you all for engaging with us this evening and actively asking questions. We hope that you all do this throughout the entire process. As a committee, we are going to have our final committee meeting in October to be able to submit the slate to our city council, and we'll have an opportunity to be able to share that out. We have an amazing spokeswoman on the council with Councilwoman Easter Thomas, who will share more about the process that we've undertaken and where you all can engage again. We also want to make sure if you're on one of those streets that we named that need additional community input, that you'll be able to share and get input into your city council about those recommendations. As chairwoman, I just want to thank all of my committee people who have participated, and in particular tonight, want to thank Ms. Thelma Crivens, Dr. Andre Johnson, and Mr. Luis Robinson Garcia, and then also all of the staff from the city of Memphis who helped make this process possible this evening. I'll give closing remarks to Councilwoman Easter Thomas. Thank you so much, and you all have a great evening.
Thank you, Chair Bradshaw. This was a robust discussion on this evening, and I definitely share the sentiments of everyone seeing on this town hall today of just the comments and the questions. And I've received a lot of emails as well, even on today. So just the fact that we are more engaging as a public in the naming and the names that we're using just shows that words and names and nomenclature is important. And as Ms. Crivens beautifully put when explaining the principles, as well as Chair Bradshaw, making sure that we promote the values that we want to hold true to Memphis and what we care about and what should be important and a priority in our lives and for generations to come. And Chair Bradshaw, you said one thing that stood out to me in saying that our streets and our major ways and pathways are sort of like our arteries in our cities. And if we're thinking of it in that analogy of that being our arteries, we have to see how we can get stronger and to remain strong as a city. And that's based on what you're built upon and your foundation. And I do believe that certain names and what we choose as a community, as Dr. Johnson put, to really honor and commemorate makes a difference on how strong that we are and how strong that we are able to be. So I definitely appreciate the work that the Renaming Commission has put forth. As Chair Bradshaw said, exhaustive, leaving no recommendation unturned. You heard the thoroughness, you heard the steadfastness, and it wasn't just a whim decision that they made in this commission. It had background, it had historical reference, and it also had contextualization as it aligns to what we're needing in our city. And so I just want to thank you again, Publicly Renaming Commission, for the work that you've done. But also I'd like to thank the public for also engaging with the commission and myself for these recommendations. And as Chair Bradshaw said, these will come to the council for either approval, rejection, or remediation. And then still encouraging communities and encouraging people in our neighborhoods that if you are wanting to change a park, place, or street, to go ahead and go through that effort and submit that request through the proper channels and getting folks involved and rallying folks together so that we can move forward on continuously reflecting the values that we hold so dear to our city of Memphis. So thank you all for joining us on this evening. I will ask if CIYN, our lovely host, thank you again, CIYN, if you could place the 4 members of the commission back on the screen for our final goodbye. But I definitely thank you, CIYN, for hosting us today so flawlessly with your technology and also your Facebook live streaming. Thank you again, Ms. Bradshaw, Mr. Garcia, Ms. Crivens, and Dr. Johnson, and also our council staff, which none of this could be possible, Mr. Bryson Whitney and Ms. Devin. So thank you all. You all have a great Wednesday evening. Thank you for your work, Renaming Commission, and thank you for your engagement, City of Memphis.
Thank you all.
Thank you.